And just to let you all know, we are now live streaming on YouTube. I was saying earlier today that I wish that I had background music to get us started as we were going through the pad. But I'm also currently next to the sea, so if you hear any birds, maybe that can be the background music. I'm glad you like it, as I can see in the chat. Some really interesting responses here. Yes, actual birds tweeting. Some very interesting responses here around automated feature extraction, a tool that facilitates collective work, efficient tools for mapping, better and more efficient tools, and maybe bringing up some of the thoughts that were mentioned earlier today. Need some more validation was a phrase that came up. Adding value to community mapping, what's sucking value, leveraging AI for sidewalk mapping, simplicity, machine-generated raw data, navigation. Cool, we'll just take a couple more minutes for folks if you'd like to add some more to the pad or into the chat, either way, and then we'll get started. I will drop the link if you don't have it already into the chat here. There you go. And we have open spaces starting on line 57. And if you're having any problems opening the pad in the first place, it may be because it's overloaded by the number of people trying to access it. Cool. So I think we can go over onto the next slide, and we'll have this pad open in the entire chat. We'll actually be asking you some questions that we'd love for you to add either into the pad or into the chat here. So keep that link with you and we'll make sure to drop it in the chat. But a little bit more about the community working group. It's a group dedicated to the support and engagement of community groups and contributors that aim to leverage OpenStreetMap data and tools for positive social, humanitarian, and development impact. And if you're interested in joining them, you can visit the wiki link, which I will drop into the chat here, to learn more about the work they're doing and how to get involved. Next slide, please. And alongside that, the Tech and Innovation Working Group is a welcoming and inclusive space to connect, contribute, collaborate, innovate, and share ideas for geospatial tech for humanitarian purposes. Recently started as of this year, I believe. And I will also drop the link into the chat here, but you can also scan this code at any point to join as well. Next slide, please. A couple of small reminders and house rules that yes, as I mentioned before, this webinar is being live streamed on YouTube and it will be recorded. If you wouldn't like your video to be included on the recording, please turn off your video now. This call also abides by the HOT Code of Conduct, which asks you to be welcoming, to be respectful, to be careful in your word, your phrasing, and your tone. And when disagreements happen, as they inevitably do, please try to understand why. And in this kind of collaboration and also in this around this topic of AI assisted mapping, I think the differences that may emerge from the ways in which we think about this topic, it's especially important to think in mind, consider where differences may come from, which is also something that definitely aim to facilitate in the communities that I come from as well. Next slide, please. So our structure for today, similar as with the call previously, so we'll go through actually a little bit different maybe from the structure from before. We have a series of kind of pre-questions, maybe asking about initial definitions and where folks are coming from, and how they think about AI and AI-assisted mapping. Then we'll go through a series of kind of rapid panel presentations with Radim and Benny. Ran, unfortunately, is not able to participate in this secondary section. Then we'll pass the mic to Victor Sunday, who will tell us more about perspectives from the ground. And then we'll have Sine sharing some initial data gathering and reflections from surveys that have been done with her. And then we'll have a kind of participatory combination of like panel questions and open Q&A for folks to be able to like ask questions and really kind of share ideas that they have around this topic as well. Really keen to hear what folks think. And at the hour, while we will kind of officially, I guess, end the call, we do have an optional 30 minutes if folks want to stay on as well, any sort of bleed over time. And like I said, facilitating. And if you'd like to share this conversation or any notes in your social media platforms, you can use the hashtags open mapping, open source tools, and AI assisted mapping if you would like. Cool. So with that, really thrilled to introduce and then pass the mic on over to Radim Stampek, who's the assistant professor of the Department of Geography in the Faculty of Science of Maastricht University. You have Benjamin Herford from the Heidelberg Institute for Geoinformation, Milan Fila, who is not able to participate, but did co-create the presentation, who is a researcher at Maastricht University as well, and Victor Sunday from the Geography and Environmental Management Department at the University of Port Harcourt, as well as myself. Next slide, please. Fantastic. So, as I was saying before, that we kind of realized when we were gathering folks together earlier today that we really kind of needed to take a step back to ask questions around first principles, to really ask kind of basic questions like, how do we define AI and how do we define AI assisted mapping in the first place? And so maybe before we start a round of the presentations, really just wanted to pass the mic first to our panelists to ask these two questions, to really learn more about how they think about these two topics, first of all. But we also invite you to be able to add like your thoughts and how do you define AI? And have you thought about maybe how you would define AI in the first place more broadly? And how would you define AI assisted mapping? And as I said before, add in the link into the pad if you'd like to answer that question and answer these questions. But in the meantime, to kick off this kind of pre-question, I will pass the mic first to Benjamin, and then maybe to Victor, and then to Radim, to go in the reverse order as before.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that kind introduction. I'm Benny, based in Heidelberg, and okay, we start with a tough question. I try to keep it short. How do I define AI and what is AI assisted mapping? So AI, broad term, I would say. So mainly for me, it's related to machine learning. Often here in the mapping context, we use it together with satellite data, so satellite imagery or drone imagery. And in the narrow sense here, what we are talking about, I think it's about detecting features like buildings, roads, or anything else in satellite data or other imagery. This is, I think, the narrow definition of AI that I would apply to this talk here, being aware of that it's much broader, but yeah, this is for here. And AI assisted mapping, I would say, is when we to some extent use these machine learning models or the results of these models, so the predicted building footprints in our mapping workflows. So everything which somehow connects to a model or an output of a model, I would call as AI assisted mapping. Yeah, maybe I try to keep it as short as this.
Thank you, Benny. Great short summary. I know extremely challenging question to kick off today with. But Victor, I'll pass it to you next.
Yeah, thank you very much. AI simply talks about requesting machine to do the work humans should actually do. And AI assisted mapping is requesting machines to go ahead to help the humans to do much of the work while the humans actually monitor or follow up what is being done to be sure that it's properly or accurately done. Yeah, I think that's a simpler way of trying to explain that so that anyone could really catch up to that. And in this case, yeah, we are asking machines to let us know what is available on a satellite imagery and help us to give us a direction so that we can verify whether it's true or not. Yeah.
Thank you, Victor. Also, just like you so expanded, I think, our definition and the process, they really complemented each other. And Radim, I think I did the horrible task of essentially asking you to follow up on those two great definitions of both AI and AI-assisted mapping.
Okay, can I? My attempt, I will be as simple as possible. I think that AI, or let's say machine learning, machine is trying to learn from experiences and to do some tasks as similar to way as a human would do as possible. But I'm sure that it's not a perfect definition of AI, but as was said before by Benny, it's a very wide topic, and I think that as was mentioned during the morning section, AI for humanitarian mapping right now is much more machine learning for humanitarian mapping. It's not about artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, for example. And what was the second question? Yes, AI assisted mapping. For me, it means using techniques of machine learning to make mapping of volunteers mapping more effective. It means faster. Sorry, it means faster and with more quality, with higher quality.
Thanks so much, Radim. That really, I think, really sets us up well for your three presentations. Because as was said in the earlier session today, sorry, the birds are very active in front of my window. The way in which we talk about and discuss AI within OpenStreetMap kind of takes on a couple of different nuances, where folks have talked about, OpenStreetMap data being used in the context of training road detection models, but we're also talking about, how can OpenStreetMap be also used in the context of like feature detection, making it easier for mapping to happen in the first place. When we talk about AI within OSM, I think in the context of both our discussion earlier today as well as now, we're kind of going across all these different applications of what that might look like. But we'll go a little bit more into that later. Again, really encourage you, if you'd like, for folks in the audience, to ask yourselves those questions, and to also feel free to write in the chat or in the pad any reflections you might have. On to the next slide. So with that, I will actually stop talking and then pass the mic on to folks to share more about their research and expertise. So on to you, Radim and Ben.
So, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your listening. Thank you for your attention or interest to this very interesting topic. My name is Radim Štampach. I'm from Department of Geography, Masaryk Faculty of Science, Masaryk University from Czechia. Me and Milan Fila cooperated on this presentation with Benjamin Herford from Heidelberg Institute for Geoinformation Technology. So please, next slide. Well, our research topic is using of building and roads pre-prepared by AI for humanitarian and OSM mapping. The research, why this research topic? Partly it's because I am not only assistant professor at the university, I am also member of team that organize mapathons in Czechia and Slovakia. So I choose or try to connect my hobby and my research. So I choose this topic. I think it's interesting topic. So our question is how to make mapping in humanitarian mapping or OSM mapping faster, how to make it more quality. And one possible answer is using AI. So probably you know that exists Rapid Editor. It's very similar to well-known ID Editor. And maybe that you also know that very popular OSM editor has a plugin called mappi AI, and both Rapid Editor and OSM with this plugin offer to mappers pre-prepared buildings and roads pre-prepared by artificial intelligence, so they can use it or they don't have to. AI buildings were pre-prepared by Microsoft and partly also by Google and S3, and AI roads were pre-prepared by Meta. Next slide, please. In fact, this initiative is not new. First, AI pre-prepared roads were used even in 2017. So there is some history in using AI roads and AI buildings. These are slides from my colleague Milan Fila, and you can see here some absolute and relative numbers, how many buildings were AI buildings were used in various different countries. So you can see, for example, that Nigeria and Kenya from Africa has the highest absolute numbers of AI buildings used for mapping, and they are also the highest relative numbers. Very strange example is Sudan, which has a very high relative number of AI buildings, but very low very low absolute number of buildings, because probably the level of mapping, total level of mapping is very low. So Nigeria and Kenya, it's well, there is a reason for it, because Nigeria and Kenya was there was a project in cooperation with Microsoft focused on mapping of buildings using AI buildings. So it's not surprised that these two countries has the highest absolute and relative numbers of buildings. Next slide, please. Quite similar situation is in case of AI roads. You can see that Tanzania, India and Vietnam has the highest both absolute and relative numbers of length of roads, no numbers but length of roads, and the situation is very similar as in case of buildings. Meta, former Facebook, has a special project for AI assisted mapping of roads in India, Vietnam, Tanzania, and also in Thailand. So it's not surprised that these countries have the highest portion of used AI roads. From a global level, I can say that well, the portion of AI buildings on all mapped buildings are slightly increasing, but but only slowly, and nowadays it's very low. Portion of AI-based buildings is 2.8% from all mapped buildings globally. So it can be seen that only in countries where there is some special project focused on AI mapping, the portion of buildings and roads are higher, much higher than global level. Next slide, please. So we did some two experiments to compare classic mapping by hand in ID editor and mapping with use of AI objects in Rapid editor, both for buildings and roads. In case of buildings, we can say that Rapid is statistically significantly better than ID editor, both in number of map buildings and both in proportion of correctly mapped buildings. It means both in quantity and quality of data. And it's the same for Experian. It's valid for experienced mappers and also for beginners. And also from feedback of participants of our experiments, mapping of buildings in Rapid is easier. Fine. Next slide, please. On the other hand, the situation in mapping of roads is different. The experiment was very similar, but with other group of participants, and the results: 2 times more mapped roads in Rapid, but 3 times more errors in Rapid. So of course it's very unhappy. I can say it from point of view of our local humanitarian mapping community. Our Czech and Slovak humanitarian mapping community has big problem with low number of experienced validators, and it means that producing more data with more errors would even make the situation worse. So our experience from or feedback from our participants about roads, mapping of roads in Rapid is more difficult in ID editor, and participants are not convinced about usefulness of mapping with AI. Next slide, please.
Okay, I take over
Yes.
from here. So why is this interesting, or what could be the impact of AI-assisted mapping on the OpenStreetMap data? So I brought one map here, and the map shows where buildings are currently mapped and where they are not yet mapped. So the size of the circle depicts how many people live in a city. So you see all big cities of the world on this map. The bigger the circle, the more people live in that city. And the color shows you how completely mapped the buildings are. So the darker bluish circles indicate a high completeness of buildings in the cities. And the more to the white you get, the lower is the completeness. So for instance, you see that the region where I'm based in Heidelberg, so in Western Europe, there are many cities which have a very high completeness of buildings in cities. So most of the buildings are mapped here. You see also many other examples around the world where you basically, or the communities already mapped a lot of buildings in the city, where there's also a high completeness. And now we take a look at the other side. So all the places where there are no buildings mapped or not yet mapped. And my assumption or question basically was that in these places, we might see a lot of AI-assisted mapping coming up in the future. And this was a bit, what I could see from my data and discussing with Radim and Milan. But what I could not answer, that's why we have this webinar here, is, and what's the role of the communities in here? Do places which are currently not mapped with buildings, do communities exist there? Do they see a value or potential of AI-assisted mapping here? So yeah, bringing kind of this map together with the AI-assisted mapping is a bit what I'm trying to find out here. And yeah, this is what we can later on also have a discussion about. And then over to Vadim again with a summary kind of the talk.
Sorry. So you can see that there are differences in results of experiments. There are differences in buildings and roads, differences in localities, differences in various groups, different groups of mappers. It seems that usefulness of AI-assisted tools is very individual, but as was shown by Benny in the previous slide, there are many localities where AI would probably be very useful and could make mapping more faster and could allow to complete map. So the question is from us to you. What is your opinion? Do you have some experience with mapping with buildings and roads prepared by artificial intelligence? Do you think it could be useful for your local community to map with AI? And for, I think the most important for me, what is the more important to you, for your community? Faster mapping at the cost of more errors, or better quality at the cost of slower mapping, slower speed? Next slide. And finally, this is the end from our side. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your feedback about using AI-assisted tools. That's everything from me.
Thank you so much, Benny and Radim. It's funny how I feel like I've learned something different in both versions of this presentation. I think the way in which you illustrated how, as you'd said, the experience with using Rapid, for example, is very dependent in the sense that at some points it seems easier, at some points it seems more difficult, but it's very, very sure that the increase in AI-assisted mapping has happened over time. And the big question of what is the role of community as the increase in AI-assisted mapping tools has grown is a huge one, along with perhaps these more specific questions around how does AI-assisted mapping affect the speed of mapping, the quality of the data produced. Definitely things that we hope will come out implicitly throughout this discussion as well. Thank you all so much. And I think with that, I will pass then the mic on to Victor, who will share his perspectives as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne. Victor Sunday is my name, and I'm a lecturer at Geography and Environmental Management in University of Port Harcourt, and the National Coordinator of Unique Mappers Network Nigeria. Good to have everyone here on board this evening. And this topic is very, very interesting because I'm looking at it from the community perspective, community participation. And we want to say that AI actually improve the speed of mapping, especially when you engage volunteers for humanitarian response mapping. But it requires experience for efficiency and data quality. In fact, when it comes to critical geospatial data, for whatever purpose, data quality is very, very important, because once there's any error, you find out that there'll be a huge misrepresentation. But then looking at the huge data or the access to open data or open map data that we are driving, you find out that AI assisted mapping has actually come in to facilitate faster mapping. And so there is need for carefulness in using AI so that efficiency and data quality could be enhanced, especially in a complex environment, difficult mapping projects, and knowing quite well that AI is a machine learning algorithm that provides prediction of futures, prediction of futures on satellite imagery, which already it has been trained for. And so it will only garbage out what has been, what it has been trained for. And so if you have difficult mapping areas like slum, like informal settlement, like for instance, in Nigeria, you could actually have tree canopies being predicted by the AI as a hot, which is part of the building features that are found in Nigeria and some part of Africa. So we feel that pure experience with ID editor will actually improve efficiency with AI-assisted mapping in OSM. And so when we have newbies, when we have mappers joining the community or being engaged, there's need to run through ID editor and use it quite well to understand how manually a mapper can actually digitize, trace those buildings before you now follow up on what the AI will suggest and so on. So actually AI saves time when it comes to project delivery for managerial response. And so probably where you have real-time mapping and responding to issues of crisis and emergency, it will help to predict futures. It will help to provide project delivery, fast project delivery. But then there's need for accuracy, and there's need also to follow up to ensure that things are properly corrected and so on. AI turns out huge edits by volunteers over a short period of time. Like the slide that Milan mentioned there, you could see that Nigeria and Kenya had the highest in the use of AI, and that was just within the period of last year when the Microsoft test came in to give us opportunity to test the AI, and part of that data was just within 2 states in Nigeria, Bauchi and Gombe. And if you look at it, we are trying to test the time as well as the manpower. And so where communities would have engaged maybe 500, maybe 200 mappers on a particular project, and then mapping over a period of maybe 6 months and gradually complete it, you can see that just with 12 mappers here in Nigeria as at that last year, when we tested that Microsoft AI-assisted building satellite image, just about 12 or thereabout, we're able to completely map 2 different states in Nigeria, and you could see very good data. And for us also, as a community, unique mappers, you could see that over the years before we started using the AI tool, we could hardly hit up to 1 million building edits, but just between last year and this year, yeah, we already have 2.1 million edits generated as a result of engaging volunteers, engaging mappers, and using AI. But then you also discover that there's need for a follow-up, and most of the time we discover that when you use AI to map and there's inaccurate mapping, or maybe the volunteer not able to, actually correct those errors, you find out there's a backlog of work for the validators, for the data quality personnel that are following up, and that could also slow work. And so where you can focus on speed and without taking care of the errors, or without minding the accuracies, you discover that at the end of the day, in as much as everyone is very quite conscious of data quality in OSM, the mapping validators would have a lot of backlog work, or would even have to return those tasks back to the mappers. And that was actually the case, because you see lots of mappers receiving back their tasks to go all over again, and make sure that those errors are properly corrected. AI does not allow beginner and advanced level same pace. What do I mean by this? You have a beginner mapper and then advanced mapper. If you want to really maybe appraise both of them, you cannot just start appraising them based on the AI, because if one uses ID editor and the other one uses AI, both of them could actually be efficient, but not at the same speed of delivery. And so if you are dealing with issue of motivating the mappers, the community, that means that you must make sure that both those who are using ID editor, the beginner mappers and advanced mappers, are equally motivated. And so it triggers a motivation for community participation in OSM mapping, and actually it improves mapping experience and level. AI assisted mapping using the RAP ID, using JSON map with AI, actually triggers community participation, and also improves mapping experience, because you see volunteers and say, oh, I want to start using RAP ID, I want to start using JSON, and everyone wants to, go for more experience, and that can only come with consistent mapping. Yeah, that's my own perspective for this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Victor. Similar again with both Benny and with Radim. I definitely learned so much from, I think, thinking through and listening to your presentation again. Similarly, there seem to be almost kind of contradictory kind of aspects coming out here, right? Where simultaneously there's this idea that it can improve the mapping experience and encourage other folks to get involved, to learn how to use these tools. But then at the same time, engagement with them requires huge amounts of maintenance, of data verification. Very interesting discussion also going on in the chat about who does the work of verifying the data that comes out of AI generated systems. And I think your talk really kind of shows what that looks like in real time and on the ground, and really in many ways may provide an example or a model for what may happen in other geographies as well, if we're not able to think through what alternatives might look like. And with that, I will pass it on to Sine to share more about the work that she has done too.
Thank you, Anne. So AI has been on our minds, I think, for some time now. And I'll actually just drop this link into the chat to sort of showcase. And I think some of you have already participated in some of the sessions that we have been facilitating for through the Tech and Innovation Working Group. But as I was saying, AI has been on our minds for some time. And in this slide deck that I just dropped in the chat here, you'll be able to see a little bit of a timeline of what sort of research have been gone through. But I think more importantly, what we are seeing today is a lack of openness. I'm following this chat very enthusiastically because I think there's quite a few comments around localization. If there's one thing that we have heard from community members, whether that is through watching conversations on Slack or inviting people into forums like this, it is capacity. Like what even is AI? How does it look like? If we're not able to have access to the raw data, to the actual models, and customize that for local mapping, I don't see a future for AI system mapping. That's my personal opinion. So one of the things that we are experimenting with right now is exactly that, an open source AI mapping tool. And as you can see here on the slides, we had a couple of months ago when we started just the very initial developments of the alpha version of FAIR. We started talking to some of the tech and innovation enthusiasts in the community, including many of you. And some of the things that we saw in our anonymous Mentimeter was, after asking the questions, what are some of the key challenges with AI system mapping services today? I think the key things that stood out is problems with accuracy. We heard this in the earlier session today, data quality, not being able to fully have a grasp over what data is being used and potentially how to have some sort of say in that. And to train, I come from AI with text, so semantic data and natural language processing. And it's the same case here. If you're not able to really fully understand what really is this, it's hard to also do something about the accuracy. And then there was some very interesting, there was quite a lot of mention around how can community help improve these models? And I think Victor tapped into that as well. People do get excited. This is, AI is a hype, sure, but it's also something that has come to stay. So finding that balance between being optimistic about this technology and this approach of artificial intelligence being valuable to the community, but at the same time, having discussions like these and making sure that we are doing this for the right purpose and in an open process from the very beginning, already with design. And next slide, please. We also asked another question. So how should AI be assisting the OSM or open mapping community? And I think two things really stood out here, and we can share all the anonymous feedback also if you're interested, for people, not instead of people. So having humans in the loop from the very beginning is something that stood out. And also simplifying processes. So some of the things that was mentioned here in terms of simplification was everything around like helping backlog in the mapping to generating statistics or even generating visual maps very quickly, supporting mappers, maybe even, I remember some mentioned during that one of the sessions that we did, perhaps even with new mappers being able to assist the mappers through the journey of becoming an advanced mapper, which will also increase data quality, which I thought was interesting. And then, of course, all the way down to validation process and issues and so on. And if we'll just go, I want us to have enough time to discuss, so I'll just go a little quickly here. So we added some of these statements just to sort of get a temperature of where people are at. There are quite a few who are actively using AI for mapping, and quite a lot who sees an opportunity in getting assistance, mapping assistance through AI. And then on the statement, I support free and open source AI tools when available. That was one assumption that we had, and which was also interesting to see how many support that. And just to add to that, free and open source, one reflection that I had last week, we were all at Phosphor-G in Kosovo, and one of the things that we're seeing now that AI is moving fast, moving so quickly, is all the various puzzle pieces of AI that is coming. Segment anything from Meta. You have obviously ChatGPT, but also dealing with text data and all of this. So it will, as I started with, half of me is quite excited to see where this heads, but also I think it's very important to keep having these conversations. All right, over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Similarly, like I was saying before, like a chorus, learning something new every time I've heard you all speak through your work. And I think with this maybe building off maybe more so the presentations that you all give, maybe to start with the panelists and then to open to the floor if anyone would like to raise their hands or add questions into the chat, which we're keeping track of here. I'm really curious how you all understand or think through the current ecosystem of tools that exist, meaning what would be an ecosystem that contains both fair and rapid, and even other, what maybe we wouldn't necessarily associate with AI assisted mapping, but maybe something like MapSwipe, for example, that has been around in the community for quite a long time, but isn't necessarily put in the same category as fair or rapid. And so, yeah, I'm wondering maybe for all of you, how would you answer the question around what does this ecosystem look like, and what are the relationships between these different tools? Are they in competition with each other? Are they are they compatible in parallel? And maybe this extends more broadly into the question of what does, can both a localized mapping system exist alongside a global or universal one? Even more difficult question to toss at you for the second round. If any of you would like to raise your hand first, but I can also call on folks if you'd like. Maybe I can toss the mic to Benny, and then Alexander, definitely would love to pass to you, and then as well on to the rest of the panelists.
Nice, cool, thanks. Yeah, good, tough questions again. I think they are compatible. So we see that that's maybe the strengths of the OpenStreetMap ecosystem, that in the past 15 years, so many different tools have been brought together, all kind of with the same goal to fill up OpenStreetMap and make it better and more useful. I think I still believe in that this will also happen with AI-assisted mapping tools. The only thing where I see it that might be difficult is currently, I would say that this many tools, the imagery, the models, the data, basically it's all from the big companies, right, provided. So we use imagery from Nexa, we use the machine learning model or machine learning from Microsoft, the buildings from Microsoft or Facebook, it mapped with AI rapid tools maintained by Facebook. So I think there is maybe not a balance here. And that's why I like Hot's approach with FAIR, to kind of make sure that also we as a community, so to say, can influence the path of that. Because I think if we only rely on the big companies, I think that's not the way OpenStreetMap worked in the past years. So that would be my stand here to say, if we make it localized, our own models, if we unpack the black box, then yes.
Thanks so much, Benny. Maybe Victor, I'm so sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but your camera is right next to my camera. So I'll pass the mic to you next. And then Alexander, I see that your hand is up, so I'll pass it to you afterwards.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Actually, when you are talking about local model, if you will read about Microsoft models, so they define how they build their models. So they have some kind of initial data set, and then by additional, then they add some data for some particular territory, and this way they made another model for another territory, and it is how all major companies adapt their models to some particular territory. So if you want some kind of localized model, so everything is accessible, so it's not a big deal. Actually, main issue is with data, because when you will try to use OpenStreetMap to train your models, you will stuck that building footprints will be shifted, and it's why so rooftops not will fit exactly to imagery. But actually, so it's not a question. So all major companies do this, and it's pretty clear how to do it. Or you not think so?
Really interesting. So you don't actually see them as being incompatible with each other, and actually maybe the universal model is immediately customizable to a local model as funded by corporate actors. Is that what you're saying?
So I said that when you need a model for some particular territory like Middle East, you just add the data from the Middle East to your data set and retrain your model, and it is how you get your model localized, and sometimes you adopt some algorithms like instance separation and so on. So it's how it is working. So path is pretty clear. Just use it. And
Super interesting.
Actually, many people try to build some kind of global model which could work in all the countries, but so there is some progress in case of really big models like Meta does, but in many industries, people just make a factory which make possible to easily customize baseline model to particular imagery or particular stuff for particular territory. So it's how things going. So big models, it's kind of challenging in an unknown territory which need big resources. But at least I not know really successful cases when people use convolutional neural networks like UNets and use it globally. So in most cases, if you couldn't solve a task by one model, you try to make it working with a bunch of different models, and just classify the world by countries or by any other properties. It's how it's working. Or maybe you know something else about it.
No, that's I think that you're making really excellent points, actually, because, and it maybe draws us into the wider discourse around AI more broadly, that I think Victor maybe really alluded to in his talk, in the sense that behind these massive systems, right, when we talk about it absolutely being possible to train these like global massive data sets with localized knowledge, the question is really what is required to have that data set in the first place, which as Victor said, requires massive amounts of verification, data cleaning. And in every example that we have, and maybe I have a couple links that I could put into the chat that come to mind around like the massive amount of work required to do that data verification, or in the context of OpenStreetMap, but it's also called like maybe data cleaning in other contexts, in order to ensure that it's a data set that can be used to make a global model in the first place. And then I think Benny, in his discussion, and maybe questions too, was also around who has that kind of power and control in many ways. Where is the push and pull coming from within the OpenStreetMap community that has historically kind of been this kind of pluriverse or world of many worlds, where different actors and motivations and different people, different communities, different companies have all kind of come together. I think you bring up a lot of really, really important and interesting points. And I also do want to flag here, folks, that we are at the top of the hour also. So if you may need to drop off, we are leaving the space open for the next 30 minutes in the extension time. I don't know if we close the recording here or if we leave the recording open, but we would love to hear feedback from you all about the format of this session. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to drop the links to the Padlet one more time in the chat. But with that, I want to thank you very much for tuning in and encourage you to join a future call, as is on this slide. And I don't know if we should close off and stop the recording.